Welcome back for another episode of What a Hoot, all part of the Keepin It Rural network. I am your host, Becca, and today we have a very special guest that takes a very different approach to education on where our food comes from. To be honest with you, I think this person has a very crazy background in entertainment and entertaining she is. Today, joining me not only with a history of entertaining in Japan, but also being a part of the wacky Wild West is Rhonda. So, Rhonda is the creator of the Thank a Farmer Magic Show, which has been debuting at the Minnesota State Fair for 12 years now. Rhonda is not only an icon to our state, but has gone throughout the nation sharing this information that she has that she's about to tell you about. And honestly, she is a great reminder that there is no such thing as a straight path in life. So, what we are about to dive into, peeps, is a wake up call. Throughout this episode, please ask yourself, how can you approach things differently and be what the world needs from you? Yeah, you. Not me, but you. Let's meet our guest. Rhonda, how did this all get started?
I was in Marshfield, Wisconsin, and I was talking to some dairy kids, and they were saying, and this is 2006, I was just asking them, I don't even remember how the conversation started, but somehow they told me that they were being made fun of and teased in school. And I asked them specifically, why are people teasing you? What's the deal? Essentially, what it was is they were living on a dairy farm, right? And so they would help mom and dad in the morning, and they had their jeans on, and the boys wore boots to school. And then after school, they couldn't just go and do things and hang out at the Dairy Queen or something. They need to get home to help back out on the farm. And they said, the kids in town don't understand any of this. And we've had people move out from Madison out here, and they just passed this law that you can't use heavy machinery on the roads before 8 a.m. And we're a dairy community, and people just don't understand. And it really hit me. I'm the first person in my family that didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in the Chicago suburb area, but all my family farmed in southwestern Iowa. And I knew how hard farming was. And my grandparents, who were very poor farmers, but they raised hay and they had some cattle, they always talked about dairy farmers were the hardest working farmers out there. And my grandparents always judged people on how hard they worked.
Oh, yeah.
The hardest were the most important type of thing. But anyway, I grew up with knowing how hard dairy farmers worked. And it really got to me that these kids, this family of 5, were just being made fun of. And honestly, when I was at Iowa State during the mid 80s, it was during the farm crisis. And I remember vividly of city kids saying when Jane or Bill or whatever didn't turn up for class, and you knew that they basically had to leave Iowa State because their family had lost the farm. I remember the city classmates would say, oh, it's okay. They'll be okay. Their mom and dad will get another job. And I was like, yeah, no, farming is not just a job. It's who you are, as a person. So when these kids were saying they were being made fun of, and knowing that most people, especially if you didn't grow up around farming, you had no clue what farming was and what goes into it and how it was or anything like that, and how it is who you are, I thought, what can be done to teach kids the importance of farming? Because we need to grow a new generation.
Yeah.
We can't just teach adults because they've already made up their minds on what things are.
So true.
At that time in 2006, 2007, commodities really weren't doing much to the general public. Commodities, beef producers, pork, dairy, honestly, was the one group that did the best in outreach.
Super ironic when you think about some of the things that they've struggled with as well.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, I knew kids loved magic. I never liked magic growing up, but I knew kids liked magic. And I thought I could put together some magic tricks, but more importantly, the magic words in order to get the magic to work will be thank a farmer, because that's the first thing you teach a child to do is thank somebody for doing something for you. That also psychologically raises the level of importance in that person's life, because that obviously means they done something for you, right? And of the Thank a Farmer Magic Show. And I think I did my first one in Victoria, Texas in 2007. The goal really was to get a national Thank a Farmer Day. That was what I talked to commodities about. I really want a national Thank a Farmer Day. I wanted it really connected with the school lunch program so that any participated in the school lunch program, anybody, any school had to celebrate Thank a Farmer Day. And it would be like around November. In 2009, I think 18 governors across our country celebrated Thank a Farmer Day. November 19th, I believe it was, or something. And it's dwindled through the day. And Thank a Farmer Day, it's hit and miss, it's Ag Day. But I explained to people, most people don't know what ag is.
Even talking about chicken eggs.
Exactly. Because originally the Thank a Farmer Magic Show was the Ag Magic Show. And Thank a Farmer was the magic words. Hiring the Ag Magic Show, and the first would say, what do you do with eggs? What's ag? And it's the whole purpose of your fair.
This is why we're here, actually.
So then we changed it to the Thank a Farmer Magic Show. It's just easier. And
quicker. Just one more step of transparency. But we wouldn't think about that having the egg background, but it makes so much sense. Yeah.
And it's funny because when I first started putting the whole thing together, there were so many things that with my mom growing up on the farm, and I would tell her what I was doing, and I don't even remember what it was. And she was like, people know that. And I said, no, they don't. And she goes, oh, they got to know that. Surely they know that. And it's, no, they don't. And I think it was something that we just take for granted. Rooster to get eggs. She was just flabbergasted that people didn't know that. And even my husband with his master's degree, educated, not dumb in any means. He married me. He's got to be smart.
Of course.
He didn't know. He thought you had to have a rooster to get eggs. It was very confusing to him. Chickens are very confusing. Eggs are very confusing.
I would agree with that. I would agree. Yep.
So that's how Thank a Farmer started. And I was going, 2009 through probably 2014, I was going from coast to coast doing the Thank a Farmer Magic Show.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Oh, I
was on the road about 7 months out of the year.
Okay. So this was your full-time gig.
Totally full-time. I didn't have time to do it.
What were you doing before that, Rhonda?
I was doing entertainment. My mom was a farm girl, but she won the national championship in baton twirling years and years ago. And she was the opening act for the Harlem Globetrotters when I was growing up. And anyway, so she was in entertainment, and then I grew up in entertainment. And so I had a juggling act when I was 13 and performed quite a bit. And I went to college. My major was journalism, but entertainment was kind of it. And then my mom and I started working together. It was during the Judds era.
Yep.
I was singing. I was wanting to do a comedy juggling act, and I had learned some music stuff. I play fiddle and musical saw and stuff like that. And my mom had gotten a job there was a new Western Heritage Museum opening up in Los Angeles. And my mom had switched from baton twirling to rope spinning, cowgirl stuff, rope spinning and whip cracking. She would take whips and toss them in the air and crack them and stuff. It was very good. It was the baton technique. She was known as America's favorite cowgirl and worked over in Saudi Arabia and Japan and all this kind of thing. And anyway, long story short, she ended up with this job at the Gene Autry Western Heritage Museum, and they wanted somebody who did Western music, and they were having a hard time. They wanted a female because it was Beautiful and Daring Women of the Wild West shows. They ended up hiring me, and I had I had to do 20 minutes, and I had 6 weeks to put it together, and I had never sung in public before.
Love it.
And I put it together mainly because I had entertainment background. I knew how to do it, right? Mm-hmm. I ended up choking up the gallery that they had me in. There were too many people came. And so they put me in the area that my mom was performing at the Autry Museum in LA. And so I would introduce her, she would introduce me. And then, like I said, it was during the Judds era, right? So people were thinking we worked together.
Yeah.
And your mom worked in Japan. The Japanese happened to see some video footage of me. They had already hired her prior, They asked if we would be willing to work together as a mother-daughter team for this big flower expo in Osaka, Japan for, I don't know, 6 weeks or something like that. And we said we would. I would come out playing the fiddle and singing. And then I would say, Watashi no okasan, my mother. And she'd come out spinning a rope and everything. And they would start, I would look at the audience and they'd start laughing a little bit. And I didn't
Yeah.
really know. And I'd say, Okatsan, like my mother. And then they would laugh. And so we asked the Japanese, we said, am I saying something wrong? And the guy says, no, you're not saying anything wrong. The problem is you are doing what we would consider your mother should be doing, the music. And she is doing what we would consider the daughter to do, the physical. So it was a role reversal, like comedy, and didn't know it. It was cultural comedy.
Right.
Really.
Yeah.
So when we came back to the States, we started working together and doing more comedy type stuff. And we were known as the Wacky Women of the Wild West. And we did Madison Square Garden. We were on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno and things like that. But so that's what we were doing in Wisconsin. We were doing the Wacky Women of the Wild West show. And so I would play fiddle and sing and yodel, and mom would do rope spinning and whip cracking. And that's when we met the family that was being bullied. I said, something needs to be done. And she's like, well, if you want to do it. And it went gangbusters. And what was so fulfilling about, or what is fulfilling about Thank a Farmer is it is entertainment, but it's educational.
Yeah.
And it's, as a person who grew up in entertainment and I did entertainment, for me, it's much more fulfilling to feel like I'm doing something for somebody else versus for myself.
I'm sure that made it easier to walk away from the lifestyle you were living too, because being part of the Wacky Women of the Wild West, that does not sound like a bad gig to be a part of. And so to leave and start this thing from scratch, someone would probably be like, gosh, this Rhonda chick is crazy. But no, you just had a passion for it.
I have a real passion for it. And it's funny, I went back to that Central Wisconsin State Fair. And when I talked about the importance of farmers, and I did, we're going to say thank a farmer. And I remember folks sitting in the back, the older folks, the farmers, sitting up a little straighter. And I thought, that's exactly why I'm doing this.
Yes, 100%.
And I ended up with mom, because we were partners, I ended up teaching her this show. And so she was on the road and I was on the road, both doing the Thank a Farmer Magic Show at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so incredible when you look at using your entertainment background for something that was distant from you. Yes, you are a sixth generation connected to agriculture, but you grew up in Chicago. The drive to educate and inform people is just, I can't thank you enough for that, because that's huge.
Well, it's an understanding. Like I always said, it's like I had one foot in the pasture and one pavement. All of my family were farmers, so I knew how hard farming was. I knew, and I spent a lot of summers with my grandparents, but I also knew that it's ignorance as much as anything when it comes
100%.
to don't grow up around farms to know really what it's all about. And I have to be honest, even I don't know a lot because I didn't grow up on the farm. I visited the farm. There's a lot of wisdom that folks don't know. You go to a doctor and your doctor has been trained. They've gone to school and then they go and they do their residency. But farm kids grow up on that farm.
Yeah. So that wisdom is ingrained in them.
It's totally ingrained for after generation.
Yeah.
An entirely different thing. And even my husband, that has no connection to farming whatsoever, we have a little acreage in Texas. And many times I'm like, how does he not understand this? It's like, he just doesn't understand because he's never had acreage before.
Yeah.
We only have 4.25 acres. It's not a lot of land whatsoever. And so I go and send him to like Lowe's or whatever to go get a weed eater and something. And he comes back with an edger.
And you're just laughing at him. And he's like, what?
An edger? What are you going to do with an edger? And he goes, well, take the lines through. I said, our driveway driveway's 300 yards. So you're going to edge all of that? I said, I've never seen a farm or an acreage with an edger before, but we're the first ones. And has he used it?
No. Oh my goodness. It's so true though. I think and you mentioned it how your grandma was like, "What do you mean they don't know that?" But
Yes.
we are the worst students that way. Like we think and assume people know,
You-
just like sometimes when doctors talk in super professional terms and I'm like, "Huh,
And that's it. There's a different language.
yes."
And knowing that different language, there's a couple different problems. Most people get a lot of information from the internet, which is
Yep.
not necessarily a good thing, right?
Agreed. Yes.
Their personal experience, a lot of it comes from farmers markets,
Mhm.
which farmers markets have come a long way.
Yes.
Way. There's a lot more what I consider, and I don't like to pigeonhole anybody, but more production agriculture folks at farmers markets now than the backyard gardener type.
Correct. Yep.
A lot more farmers than I would consider gardeners right
Mhm.
now. So they're getting a lot better information. But I would have conversations with people saying, is it true that the tomatoes at the grocery store are spray painted red? And I'm like, no, who told you that? But the
Right.
farmer's market. I was like, yeah, because they're trying to sell, $6 a pound tomatoes.
Yeah. And you try not to look at them and say, "No, are you crazy?" But that is the
Oh,
challenge we have as informing them.
yeah.
Ah,
And they just don't know. And like I said, they're talking to somebody face to
mhm.
face that's trying to sell them something, right?
Which is so sad. Your one face-to-face connection misinforms. Yep.
So they would get information from a farmer's market, the internet, which
Mhm.
things that pop up. Back in 2007, that was PETA,
Mhm.
on agriculture. And then there was the anti-GMO groups
Yeah.
that would pop up. So they knew nothing about GMOs and they knew nothing about animal agriculture. Then the third, now this one may shock you a little bit. The biggest problems as far as modern agriculture were folks that grew up on a farm but hadn't lived on a farm since they were kids and they were older folks
Yes.
because everything was better when they were a kid, but they have no idea all the technology and everything that's gone into farming now.
The
And they
improvements from when they were working hard and walking uphill both ways.
play, but they're knowledgeable,
Mhm.
right? Because they grew up on a farm. They
Mhm.
just want to reminisce about how great it was when they were a kid.
Isn't it funny how we do that as humans, though? Once something is brought up, we find this instant need to associate ourselves with it, however we can, however desperate it is. We're like, oh,
Right.
my cousin so and so has a farm here. And we just try to find that connection.
But with animal agriculture, specifically the folks that raised hogs outside versus housed, that was a big discrepancy with a lot of the folks that grew up on farms that raised them outside. And they've never ever been to any of these facilities. They don't even know what it is.
Oh,
And so they shouldn't be telling people that, oh, no, you
mhm,
don't want to do it that way. And that's the wrong way to do it
mhm.
because they haven't seen it.
Oh, yeah. And since agriculture is so broad, that probably is our number one challenge as we try to improve our ability to talk to consumers. What else is holding us back, Rhonda?
I think you have to constantly be communicating and speaking to folks and speaking in their terms, but also figuring out where they're getting their information and where the next crisis an activist or somebody can use against what you're doing. 2006, 2007, 2008, probably up to about 2012, you had your PETA and your anti-GMO, but the anti-GMO really started to go by the wayside. People really started to get a lot of great information on that.
Yeah. Yep.
And so they learned pretty quick, oh, wow, actually, this is very sustainable and really important.
I think the hunger thing saved us a lot there. That helped us a lot.
But I see a firestorm starting again.
Tell me more.
And this is just my opinion from what I'm seeing, because I got married in 2014 and I was looking at ag and going, agriculture really doesn't need me at all. You guys have gotten so much better at communicating to the general public, social media, and farmers are talking, and I'm not needed. When I first started, I was only one out there.
Yeah.
There wasn't social media, there wasn't Facebook like there was, and nobody was talking. Now everybody's talking, which is great. But so PETA really doesn't have that much going for itself, I don't think anymore, much.
They're still at the fair every year.
There, but I think people with animal agriculture, it's climate.
Yes.
Climate.
Sustainability, the environment.
Yes. The climate scare is the new PETA and the new anti-GMO.
Yeah.
Again, have to explain what farmers do using the terms that are used in the climate stuff. So water conservation, carbon footprint, all the different things that they're trying to use against animal production and against growing practices and against all the different things that they can come up with, because obviously there's weather outside and there always is, and there's always something. It's always hot, in the summertime, and it's always really bad in the wintertime, and there's storms, and we have a lot better coverage than we ever have in the past on all those things. We just need to constantly be communicating in having folks understand that agriculture is not the problem.
Yeah. So we can all do a better job of constantly communicating. Is there anything that you have found is a great way to communicate, or something, how to have a conversation with someone that is productive versus confrontational or negative or suggestive?
Yeah, I'll give you an example, a couple different examples, actually. I wrote my little fun farm fact books for kids, and a lot of it, most of it is byproducts, because I was trying to circumvent the whole PETA thing, right?
Yeah.
When all the byproducts we get from animals, it's not the whole thing. If you don't eat meat, you're not going to save the world, because all the byproducts too, it's not just meat. So I had a friend whose daughter was very, very involved with PETA. And I had many friends that were involved in animal activists. And this one friend of mine's daughter, I asked her, I said, could I talk to you? Like, when did PETA approach you, or when were you given materials in PETA? And so hers was, I think, middle school, and it was about a dairy calf left along the side of the road. And I said, really? I said, do you remember any more about it? No, I just remember this dairy calf was abandoned. And I said, okay, so I'm going to say this, and you can believe me or not, but that doesn't make any sense to me, because that calf actually is worth some money, right? You're not just along the side of the road, but
that's
whatever.
Not what they want to hear, because we need to care about little calf.
It just doesn't make any sense to me. And this is why, whatever. And I said, thank you very much. And I said, I've written these books, and here's a set. And if you ever have any questions regarding agriculture, if I don't know it, I know somebody that will, and I'll find out any answer you might have. She never asked anything, but she always followed me. I had a Facebook page at the time. She would follow what I was doing. And she's getting ready to go to college. She got a full scholarship to DePaul University in Chicago. Not a dumb kid at all.
They often aren't. Yeah.
Before she left for college, she wanted to say goodbye and everything. And she says, oh, by the way, she says, I tell my vegetarian friends, you're not a real vegetarian if you drive that car, because those car tires contain stearic acid made from cows and sheep. That's in the book. And I started laughing. I thought, that's a perfect example. I didn't have to confront her. I just gave her educational material. Yeah. And that is the thing to do. It's just, education doesn't have to be confrontational.
Right.
If somebody asks you a question, especially if it's something where you're like, oh my gosh, how do you not know that? Don't do that. Whatever you do, I do not know that. Just say, oh yeah, it really should be an awakening to you to go, wow, how did they not know that?
Yeah. Where did we go wrong?
You need to question yourself more on where it is. And I've had many a conversation at the Minnesota State Fair on eggs. Before they had the chickens in the Miracle of Birth Center, and people would argue with me that the brown eggs were better and all that kind of thing. And somebody said, you're on the side of industrial agriculture. And I said, why do you think that? Because you said the white eggs are as good as the brown eggs. And I said, because they really are. And I
Mhm.
said, I'm on the side of farmers. But the most important thing is, I think, for people to understand that you have to communicate. You have to
Mm.
communicate level of the person that's asking the question.
Yes. Oh, so true.
Answer their question. Then you can elaborate. But a lot of times we want to show how smart we are.
Like we have something to prove or we're on the defense.
You just answer the question they're asking.
Yeah.
And then that other question, answer that.
Mm.
But you don't go on and on about everything. And you really have to listen to what they're asking.
Yeah. It's so much more about sharing and humbling yourself a little bit and saying, "Hey, what did I not do or what are we missing that people are not
Yeah,
understanding this?" Right? And taking it
right.
from a helping approach. Such a good point.
Yeah. And so it's when they ask a question, sometimes just repeating the question and
Mhm.
say, my understanding, you're wanting to know, are eggs different from caged chickens than free range chickens? What does that mean? And a lot of times I try to explain things to, especially if it's animal agriculture, try to
Mhm.
things in dog and cat terms,
I do the same thing in my classroom. Yep.
which a lot of times agriculture is like, don't compare to a pet. That's the understanding of the general public. They don't understand. At livestock shows, I got to the point where I would ask, what is livestock?
Yes.
And they didn't know what livestock was. They're at a
Mhm.
livestock show, but they don't know what livestock is,
When
you
in
know?
our minds, it's another word for animals.
Yes, and animals that are used
Right.
for that type of
Mhm.
thing. But yeah, it's so you have to be very cognizant of what exactly they're asking
Yeah.
and after that,
Mhm.
then you can elaborate if they're asking more questions if they're interested.
You
And
have a full-fledged conversation instead of an educational experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And because I get a lot of information for me, for my program, my show, for my audience by what they ask.
Oh, absolutely. That was one of my questions too, is there's obviously a gap for all of us since agriculture is so broad. Where do you fill in the gap that you have with agricultural knowledge? Because even teaching subjects, there's like, oh, I'm really anxious about teaching this class because that's not what I know. Where do you
Right.
find your info, Rhonda?
I find my info from talking to people like yourself.
Yeah.
We've had conversations in the back.
Mhm.
I've asked questions. I don't remember what exactly, but I'm always
Oh,
then
plenty of them.
picking your brain to find out what you know so then I can turn around and repeat it. Like for instance, I went up to the ag building this year and because I'm doing a apple juice trick and I got one of the first kissed apples and there was a gentleman standing there at the apple display and I said, "Do you know anything about these apples?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I grew them." And I said, "Now how many years does it take to get from an idea to the apple where we can buy it?" And he was saying 25 to 30 years essentially to
Right.
market. A little tidbit which I thought was very interesting. He said because he had an orchard at one time and he said, "The UM sold us these first kiss trees and I had to pay, I think it was $2 a tree a year to market these because it's a licensing thing." This was the interesting part. They sold the same trees to Washington State. Washington, which is the state that grows the most apples in the United States, right?
Mm.
The first kiss apples under a different name.
Oh,
So in Texas, where I am, I may be getting Washington first kiss apples, but they're called Rays.
interesting.
Yeah. So in my show now, I say
Mhm.
this is a fruit apple, but if you go out of state and you happen to see an apple that says rave, that is our first kiss apple. It's
Ah,
just under a name grown in Washington state.
and people love those tidbits, right? Those little pieces of
Yeah,
information that they can latch onto, and they're like, "Oh, I know something about apples," right?
something you may not know.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a little bit like here in Minnesota, we know about sugar beets, right? People don't realize that if you read sugar, it doesn't say cane sugar, that's sugar
Mhm.
beet sugar, because the sugar cane board requires that any cane sugar actually be labeled cane sugar. It's just a fun farm fact,
Yeah.
a little fun thing.
Yeah.
But so that's I'm always talking to people and you find out all sorts of different things.
Mhm.
But when I started this program, I had no idea that our money was made from cotton. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
There were lots of things that I learned in developing the program myself that I think is important. And people just don't realize how important farmers are. But more importantly, what they really don't know is how tech savvy farmers are
Yeah.
and how smart farmers are.
Is there something you do in your show for that?
No, because I'm more about all the things that come from the farm because it
Yeah.
really I'm more for
Mhm.
kids as far as everything they use comes from. But that's something that I think is really important for the general public to know that commodities really need to, and that, see, it goes along with the climate thing.
It does. 100% does.
So that is the thing that really needs to be taught that
Mhm.
is in my wheelhouse because of how my program is developed and the purpose that it serves. But anything in agriculture needs to be really talking about the technology, the high tech farming that is done today.
And I think that's a good challenge for any of our students that are listening too. If you are looking for a platform, that is one area that agriculturalists struggle to talk about because it is harder to relate to and it seems very cliche. And so, if there is a good way to connect to people, there is a challenge that can be accepted and taken on.
Oh, yeah. All the self driving stuff.
Yeah. Oh,
They started off in agriculture, drones, agriculture, all the things that agriculture is at the cutting edge of that people have no clue.
yeah. Yeah. I think about how you took this whole idea of Thank a Farmer and how it came from a sprout of a little seedling in your brain to what it is today. And you think about egg technology, it is the same exact process, right? We have these ideas of, I have this problem and we need to fix it. And then it turns into this thing that impacts everyone, even outside of
Yeah.
agriculture, right?
Mine was an injustice,
Yeah. Mhm.
really. And then the education part of it
Mhm.
was the most important part to correct that injustice.
Yeah. Rhonda, when you were starting all of this, you obviously had some connections from the entertainment industry, but I think about kids who are starting to try and advocate on their own or teachers that might want to share their story. How do you get people to latch on to your ideas and to say, have me at your next presentation?
First off, you have to develop something that's needed. It has to be needed, right? So you have to see where there's a lack in something that you can fill. I filled something that it's just non-existent. There wasn't anything there that was talking about agriculture in the terms that the general audience could understand. You have to find what's missing and it doesn't have to be entertaining, but there has to be an interest.
Yeah, something to catch people.
Yeah, something that catches the interest, but also fills a gap. You're
Mhm.
filling a gap somehow. And I don't know if that's robotics. There's just so many different ways of communicating with social media and things now, with everything that kids can do. I think it's really endless. I just my whole thing is find a need and fill it somehow.
Yeah. Then it's easy to find your audience, right?
Yeah, and the different commodities, the different
Mhm.
ag companies, the different teachers conferences.
Yeah, because you didn't just present to consumers. A lot of your groups were commodity groups that you presented to.
I had to essentially audition for the Iowa State Fair, the commodities.
Ah.
Commodities sponsored me at the Iowa State Fair,
Oh,
all the different commodities. Or I had to go to Iowa Pork to their headquarters there in Des Moines, in West Des Moines.
yep.
And Iowa soybean was there, corn, the Iowa State Fair, ag education folks were there. I can't remember what all the different commodities were there. And I had to show them and do like a presentation so that they would know to see if they wanted to sponsor me.
Yeah. Do we want to buy into this idea?
Yeah, buy into it. And so you have to be prepared on anything that you do to back it up. And I remember them asking about, I did a beef trick. And so it's this balloon, and we kill the cow and then we bring the cow back magically. I've done it here in Minnesota, but I remember them going, if you kill the cow, or are the kids going to get upset, or people, they get upset when you talk about lipstick on a pig, that lipstick's made from fat. How do they handle things like that? And I said, it's a lot like when a kid falls down. If you go, oh my gosh, are you okay? The kid will cry. And if you're just like, hey, come on, you're fine. Let's go. It's the same thing. Nobody
Yeah.
will give a second thought. And sure enough, never ever had any problems with the trick. Nobody asked, oh, you're talking about killing things. And no, I'm
Right.
not. People follow your attitude.
So true. Yeah, because I'm sure anything about how positive and flawless this process seems for you, there are probably times where it did not go well for you too. And
Yeah.
like tricks and differences you've made to your shows that have been totally modified over and over again because something didn't work right. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's what stops a lot of people from sharing their story or trying to have these conversations. They're like, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I don't have the information?
In life, nothing is for sure,
Yeah.
ever. And so you always need to be stretching yourself. If you're not stretching yourself, if you're not trying, if you're not doing something that is challenging to you,
Yeah.
and chances you may fail at it, then you're not accomplishing anything.
Amen to that.
You're not accomplishing anything if there's not a risk of failure.
Yeah.
There'll be times, and I remember doing this one program, and there, through the years, I've had different dialogue and I've done different tricks and things like that. And I remember I had taken this one thing out, and it was a breakfast thing. And I don't even remember what the trick was, but I remember beating myself up about this trick. Why did I go into that again? I didn't mean to do that. And, it screwed up the show, I thought, and anything. Anyway, this mother comes up the next day and says, thank you so much. That program that you did was so great. And that one thing when you asked about, did you have breakfast? And she said, my son brought his little friend with him. And I knew, had the kids raise their hand if they had breakfast. He didn't raise his hand. And she said, after the program, I asked him, did you not have breakfast, Johnny? And he said, no, ma'am. And she said, I got to talking with him, and his grandmother, he's being raised by his grandmother.
Okay.
There's 3 kids at home, and grandma needed public assistance. There was no food in the house whatsoever. These kids have not been fed all weekend. And so I found that out. I would never have known if you hadn't asked that question. And so I went, got them groceries. And so she went through this whole thing. Thank you for asking that question. And I thought to myself, wow, that was something I wanted to take out of the show. And I was beating myself up for putting it, and look what it did.
Yeah.
It's like that you never know
What your
life,
impact is going to be.
what the impact is.
Yeah.
That's a little off topic as far as challenging, but
what a heart-filling story too. Like if there's something to motivate people from this whole conversation, that story will do it right there.
you have to get out there. You have to do what, if you believe in God or don't believe in God, I do. And I think that many times God has directed me down a path that I know. And it's a story like that in the end. So do your passion, find what your passion is, and follow that passion, whatever it is. Find the need. Anytime that there is a need or a desire on your part and a need on the other side that you can give to somebody, that will be a fulfilling end.
And like you said, whatever you do, people are going to follow your attitude. So whatever direction you take it, be confident, be positive. It's going to be fine.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, this has been a home run. Okay, tell us, what does Thank a Farmer look like now? You said you were at your peak of traveling coast to coast, and obviously things have changed a little bit. What's Rhonda up to these days?
I'm a wife and a grandma now.
Love it.
So I'm not on the road 7 months out of the year, right?
Yes.
So I do the Minnesota State Fair. I do a fair in Amarillo. I live in Texas. And so I do more in the Texas area and like in some livestock shows and things. I'm not traveling as much anymore. Honestly, y'all have done, all the commodities are doing a great job. I was in Palm Beach was it last year? I guess it was last year. I went to West Palm Beach, which was really cool because they grow entirely different things, right?
Oh,
They grow
yeah.
sugar cane and they've got all the citrus and all that kind of thing. It's very interesting.
Mhm.
The thing about agriculture is no matter where you go in this country, there's agriculture and it's different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so there's always something to learn from where you are going. I did a peanut festival in Dothan, Georgia. Dothan? I don't know. Anyway, Enterprise, is it Enterprise, Alabama? Enterprise, I believe it's Enterprise, Alabama, has the only monument to a agricultural pest. Do you know what that pest is? This is a great story.
I
This
do
is a
not.
great, it's the boll weevil. The boll weevil. So what happened, and I don't remember the years exactly, but the boll weevil is death on cotton.
Yep.
So as the boll weevil apparently was coming up from Mexico and devastating the cotton crop, was coming towards Enterprise. Now, Enterprise was a very poor area, but they had big cotton producers, but everybody's pretty poor. And the town folks were a little bit worried about this boll weevil coming, but they didn't think it would cross the river. They didn't think it would river and get them, but it did. And the town was just dying off essentially. And one of the town leaders happened to go to Virginia and he came back with peanuts and he said, I wonder if we could try peanuts. And talked to one of the cotton producers in producing peanuts, and the crop was so great and it produced so many peanuts that now it's the peanut capital, and they were able to build a hospital, they were able to build schools, they were able to do all these things because the boll weevil destroyed their cotton, and they were able to bring in peanuts to replace it.
That's crazy.
So they celebrate the bad thing that brought prosperity to them.
Honestly,
and
what a good life lesson, right?
Great life lesson. And that's, I can't remember. I think it's Alabama. I got to Google it. I can't remember if it's Alabama or Georgia. I traveled so much. I can't remember what's, but it's a great story. And I think it's a great story for students too. As a teacher, we look at things that are bad as being bad, but sometimes they're the best thing that ever happened. And that's what the boll weevil was to the folks. So they have this boll weevil. They have this like 1920s woman statue, like almost like the Statue of Liberty kind of woman, holding a big silver bowl with a big weevil bug in the center of it, in the center of town.
This is just awesome. I want to go see this thing now.
It's a great life story. It's a great fun farm fact too. I'm pretty sure it's the only monument to a agricultural pest.
And understandably so. It probably should be.
Yeah.
Holy moly, man. I love this. This entire conversation has not just been story time. It's been fun facts. It has been its own little Think a Farmer magic show. I'm curious, can you tell us, even if people are just listening, what is one of the magic tricks that you do? Can you explain one of them to us?
Let's see, what's a fun one? I don't know. I think the sugar trick is a pretty good one.
I would agree.
The sugar tricks I asked for here in Minnesota. I asked what Minnesota farmers grow, and I have little packs of sugar because we all love sugar, right? Especially at the fair. We eat so much stuff full of sugar, stuff that we would never dare eat at home.
Yes.
But we're at the fair and it's like really sugary, really super good. So anyway, I have these sugar packs. And so I say, what do Minnesota farmers grow that makes this sugar? Most of the time, honestly, most folks say sugarcane, but we can only grow sugar in a tropical environment, right? So that's only the southern part of the United States, and limited even that. Here we grow sugar beets, right? And we actually grow more sugar beets in our country than sugar cane. Whoever gets the sugar beet question right, that's the kid who I pick. So they come up, I've got a glass full of little packs of sugar, and I tell them, pick out what pack you want. And I have a little red bandana, and I show them the bandana. There's no hole in the bandana. And I make a little pocket with my hand, And I have them open that pack of sugar and pour the sugar into the little pouch that we've made with the bandana, in my hand. Then I hold one corner of the bandana. Now, keep in mind, we've put that sugar down in my hand and the other one that's made this little pouch, which they can see. And they hold the other side of the bandana. And on the count of three, we say our magic words, thank a farmer. We're going to make that sugar disappear. So on the count of three, we say our magic words, thank a farmer. And then I have them pull on the bandana on one corner and I pull on the other, and it slowly, the bandana pulls out of my one hand that has held that sugar, and all the sugar is gone. And then we show both sides of the bandana, and usually the kid is like, where in the heck did that go? And so that's an example of one of the magic tricks, but
Yeah.
they're fun little tricks. Whoever answers the question correctly is the kid who gets up. And I've had a blind child that got the answer right. So he came up and helped with the magic trick. It was the apple juice trick, actually.
Ah.
We poured it in the glass, apple juice. And then we made it. It's really a lot of fun. No matter where I am or what I'm doing, the audience is always different. And always lots of really great questions afterwards. A lot of times, just really a lot of fun and very fulfilling. And a lot of farmers, what is satisfying too for me is I have a lot of farmers that come up and say, thanks for what you're doing.
You found a way for what they love and think is fun. You've made that fun for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually have had farmers come up and say, man, I didn't know a lot of that stuff you were talking about. I want to teach the general public sports of farmers, but I also want to respect the farmers, and hopefully that they look at me as being a good representative of what they're doing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I think I do a pretty good job at that.
I would say you do a phenomenal job. Rhonda, you're an icon. Speaking of that, though, can you share the story that you were telling me earlier about the positive point in your day today? It was super ironic that this happened today, but I think it speaks true as to why this was probably worth leaving the wacky women of the Wild West to come venture into this career instead.
Yeah, I had a family come today that they've seen me every year for the past 12 years. And it was a father, a mother, a daughter, and a son. The daughter's 23, the son's 20. This was his last year at showing here at the Minnesota State Fair, and they've come every year for the last 12 years. So they wanted to make sure that they came this year, the last year is here, and have a picture of all five of us together and bought a set of books. And it was really, really sweet of them.
That's impact right there. So if you ever wonder if you're doing a good job, just remember that one.
I'm always learning myself.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of fun doing it. And that's another thing. No matter what you do in life, love what you're doing and have fun with it.
I've never seen you at the state fair and like within a 5-minute period, you're like, there's never a time where you're not laughing at some point. Like it's great. You are just that sunshine. And I think it's partially because you love what you do.
Love what I do, and I love learning.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. Be a sponge, everyone. Be a sponge.
A lot of times I sit down and watch the presenters myself.
Yes.
Learn from every single presenter that's there.
Just the other day, you went and sat down and watched my kid show about reindeer. Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's always something to learn. And that's the thing that I think a lot of times we think we know. That's when you stop learning, and that's when you stop being effective.
Oh, that's when we hurt ourselves. Like you're putting a hurdle right in front of yourself right there. So take the guard down, learn. There's always room for it.
For sure.
Yeah. Rhonda, where do we find you? Where do we find these books? How do we get in touch and see the Thank a Farmer Magic Show?
You can go to thankafarmer.com and come to the Minnesota State Fair. That's where you see me.
It's the best place ever.
And honestly, I've done so many fairs, but Iowa State Fair was my home state fair that I always did. And I enjoyed it because it was my home state fair. And it's a great fair, very iconic, great fair. But Minnesota, you guys really take education to the nth degree. You really value education. Everybody at the state fair, from Michelle Butler, who I deal with the ag education department at the fair itself, and then FFA every single thing that you guys do is excellent at the fair. And that's what I enjoy. So I love coming to the Minnesota State Fair. Very few fairs understand education like you guys do.
That's so cool. And that's a big part of why we love having you back too, because you get it and you love it just as much. So it works perfectly. Yeah. No, this has been a great story time. Honestly, this has been a pep talk for myself and for, I'm sure, everyone else listening. And I really hope that this instigates not only a whole lot of appreciation, but a whole lot of advocacy. And I think that's an area that we can all work in.
Really, honestly, what's happening now, you always have to look at trends.
Yeah.
And the climate thing it's a very serious thing. Policies are being made right now, big time, around solely the climate.
That will impact us forever.
So we have to be on the front, especially with the technology stuff. That's your wheelhouse.
Right.
But you got to get front and center with these politicians and with the general public, because the general public drive it.
Yes.
So you have to get in there with all of the stuff that agriculture is doing that helps the environment, doesn't hurt the environment.
Yeah. It's amazing how this industry keeps us on our toes. There's always something new, always something changing. But at the end of the day, it's the same message. So always thank a farmer, right?
That's right.
Thank you, Rhonda. We really appreciate this. Yeah.
Thanks.
This has been fantastic. Thank you, Keepin' It Rural listeners, for joining us today on What a Hoot. It's not a party without you there. Follow Our Crazy on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to check out all episodes and extras at keepinitruralgirls.com.
That's all, folks.